Okay, the Water Quality Management Committee meeting of Thursday, May 4th, 2017 will come to order. We have a couple of welcome guests here with us today. Priscilla Moore, who spent many long hours in this room as part of the group that came before this group. And she brought a guest with us,
Libby Hearn.
Libby Hearn, better known in Falmouth as Libby Bidwell.
Yes.
Which is a good name to have in this town. Welcome to you both. First item on the agenda is a town-level mapping for properties within watersheds of impaired estuaries discussion. We have a map up on the screen and an introduction to a discussion from our consultant, Sia.
Thanks.
Carlos.
Hi. We worked with the Cape Cod Commission. We worked with the Cape Cod Commission to put together a map to show where all of the watersheds are in the town of Falmouth, and to look at where the nitrogen load is coming from that goes into those watersheds. The committee is obviously familiar with the individual watershed maps because we've reviewed each watershed individually. But to get a picture, and I think more interestingly, a sense of the town as a whole and how much of the town is actually within the watersheds of our impaired estuaries, we thought putting together a town-wide map would be a useful tool. And so if you start, and maybe I'll maybe I won't. If you start at the north corner of Falmouth, you see Megansett Harbor and the watershed. And all of those dots that don't look terrific on the screen but are sort of orange blobs, those are all septic loads.
Do you have a pointer? Because you could get
There is one in
Yeah.
here
that
somewhere.
traveling microphone and actually use it. Yeah, and if you use that mic,
Do you want to grab the
stand.
mic
You can
that's
stand
from
right there.
on the lectern?
There's sand. Now I have to see it.
it'll come right out. You can walk around.
There, how's this
Well,
work?
Take it off the,
Huh?
it's okay. And I was just going to say, if you take it off the stand, you might not knock the stand over.
Not be quite so tethered.
Just enough to hang herself with.
So here we have, this is obviously the town of Falmouth. And we start here at Megansett Harbor. And you can see Megansett and Fiddlers and Rands all sort of come together in this meta watershed. And these green lines show all of the contribution into Megansett Harbor and then Fiddlers and Rands, which again, this is hard to see because we're looking at the whole town all at once. We've gone in at a much finer resolution and seen the estuaries individually, but this gives you a sense that this is 151.
No,
28.
This is 28, sorry. Yep,
And 151
The red line,
across
that's
there.
it.
and there's 151.
Right,
And this is 28A.
right.
So it gives you a sense of even if you're past and all the way to Route 28, there is a significant amount of nitrogen going into Megansett Harbor from that far up. Wild Harbor is another good example. You're going all the way up, and there's much less development as you're heading to Joint Base Cape Cod, but you've got all this development contributing to the Wild Harbor watershed. Now we go down to West Falmouth. So we have Megansett, Fiddlers and Rands, Wild Harbor, that's North Falmouth. We're now in West Falmouth. And again, you've got Route 28 here, 28A here, West Falmouth Harbor here, and all of this, and going all the way up to 151, nitrogen load that actually contributes to West Falmouth Harbor. So as we come down, our next impaired estuary is Quisset, and that has a smaller zone of contribution, or watershed as we call it. And I'm saying this for our TV audience, and obviously the committee is aware of these things, but for the community at large to understand that Quisset Harbor is influenced by all of the nitrogen from septic systems coming in from, as far away as I think
Woods Hole Road.
Woods Hole Road. Oyster Pond, similarly, and Salt Pond. And then we get into, we call this the south coast of Falmouth, and the south coast estuaries, Falmouth Inner Harbor, Little Pond, Great Pond, Green Pond, Bourne's Pond, and McCoy, have watersheds that go all the way up to 151.
Well, they actually go,
further
beyond.
in some cases beyond.
And they go out of the town of Falmouth into either Sandwich or Joint Base Cape Cod. But the entire watershed impacts what happens in those estuaries. And if you take this map and you do a GIS analysis, so you take the centroid of the parcels, and you count the number of parcels that are in watersheds in Falmouth, and you compare that to the number of parcels that are outside, so the areas that have colored orange versus blank, you'll find that 75% of the parcels in Falmouth are within one of the impaired watersheds. And we thought that that would be a good piece of information for the committee to be looking at, and also for this sense of, am I contributing to an impaired watershed? It shows that most of the town, 75% of the town is.
Ron?
Great, thanks, Thea, that was great. On that, though, we have, I got my own little pointer.
Yeah, you got his own
I got my own.
You hang on to that one.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that down we still have like Eel Pond and Woods Hole, which is impaired. And I don't know if Little Harbor's really that impaired, but we do have that as well. And I'm just wondering then, I mean, it looks like people living in these other areas kind of getting off the hook in terms of worries, priorities within decades, let's just say. But I don't know if is that what we're thinking? Is that sort of one of the takeaways?
Well, they're not affecting an estuary.
Right, well, they're affecting Buzzards Bay in this case, and that would be the Buzzards Bay.
Yeah, I think the
Coalition.
scientific consensus is that to the extent they're affecting Buzzards Bay, it's so minimal that it's not measurable and doesn't matter. Rain will affect it more.
Another way,
Woods Hole's on the sewer.
well,
Well, I
that's
know.
also true. Although
But it's
not
already
all.
impaired. It's not, the sewer wasn't designed to deal with Eel Pond entirely, so.
Now, Ron, I have a question. Is Eel Pond on the 303D list of impaired waters?
I do know.
I don't know.
I don't think it is.
I
I don't believe it is actually, and it doesn't have an MEP report associated with it
Right.
either.
Right.
So that's why it doesn't show up on the impaired map, per the regulatory.
Well, it's so small compared to the probable tidal flux going in.
Well, no, I think it's pond watchers have declared it as marginally impaired, or it's impaired. It's not severely impaired, but it is still the case, and the sewer's been there for 40 years now, more or less.
1946.
Well, not completely around the pond, right? That came with the 1980 expansion, did it? I think so, because I know I owned a property there, and it was hooked up around that time.
Can I make a
Yeah.
comment?
Sure. Is that a comment?
Well, no, I was just going to pursue Eric's comment about Buzzards Bay. I think we could largely say Nantucket Sound, too, is largely unaffected if you look at the system. I mean, the problem is the shallow ponds is where we've got the issue, I think, so.
Right, and that's been the focus of DEP, and that's why the MEP, Massachusetts Estuary Project, focused on all of these estuaries, and you're looking at the 15 studies that were done and the degree to which they were affected. Some are affected more than others, depending on the development in that area. I wanted to take this discussion in a slightly different direction. So I think this is a very interesting map to educate the public about your watershed isn't just where you are right next to the estuary, it stretches inland. This is data that the U.S. Geological Survey and the Cape Cod Commission also use. And so it's, realizing that each of those lines is, probably 500 feet wide. The point is you can identify with some degree of accuracy whether your property is in or out of a watershed. This becomes somewhat more pertinent when we think about the accessory bylaw that was passed by town meeting, and I just copied this directly out of my warrant, so please excuse the little scribbles here and there. So this was Article 7 of the last April town meeting. And if you look down under 3 requirements as to where you can have these accessory apartments, and you look at F, whether allowed as a matter of right or by special permit, those being the 2 avenues for getting these accessory apartments, accessory apartments located on lots subject to the provisions of the Water Resource Protection or Coastal Pond Overlay Districts. The total number of bedrooms shall not, and then it goes on to lay out some specific requirements. So every house that is in one of those watersheds is subject to this provision, this 3F. And if you exceed the 1 bedroom per 10,000 feet, then there's a process going through the Board of Health. And this piece wasn't particularly discussed at town meeting, but as the reality comes through, as people start to say, okay, I'd like to have an accessory apartment within my house, they're going to need, the town is going to need, the building commissioner is going to need to have this map, and it exists in our GIS department, as to whether your parcel is in or out. And if it's in, then 3F, they're going to have to look at the particulars of that.
Steve, then Ron?
Following up on that, the last sentence in that is, unless they're connected to a sewer system or to an on-site septic system with enhanced nitrogen removal approved by the Board of Health.
Yes.
Will that carry forward to the probable future time when the Board of Health defines enhanced to be less than 10 milligrams per liter?
I think so.
Or could someone say, well, I put it in 2017 when 19 was good enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to make me upgrade it now, are you?
I can't speak for the Board of Health. It's an obvious question. I kind of doubt that they would go back. You're sort of grandfathered, but I can't say for sure.
The general rule is if you put something in that qualifies and meets the standard when you put it in.
You put it in.
That,
Like building code things.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's good enough. Ron?
I did see this, and when I did see it in there, I thought that it was, I wasn't going to say anything, except I wasn't going to bring attention to it necessarily, but I did think that it kind of puts the Little Pond area on the same footing as the rest of the watersheds in town. In other words, with the new bylaw, the growth control, whatever it's termed exactly, is just very similar, if not exactly, almost the same wording as this. So it sort of puts the whole town under the same provision.
If they're within an impaired watershed.
Right. Well, that's what I mean, yeah.
But there are clearly areas, the Woods Hole area, there's sections of West Falmouth, there's a section just between West and North Falmouth, which are not in an impaired watershed, so this provision would not apply to them.
And I have a question too, the total, in section F, the total number of bedrooms, is that total per structure or total per apartment?
Total per property.
Per property, that's what I'm looking at, because E
Yep.
says can't exceed 4.
That's correct.
So, and then now if we're at 10, only 1 bedroom. But
Unless
it's grandfathered. So the idea is if you're less than 10,000 square feet, which a large number of these lots must be, if you look at the density of the dots,
Yes.
it's completely unavailable to a substantial fraction of Falmouth's footprint.
Right. Right.
Okay, thank
You
you.
can still have 1 bedroom, right? It allows 1, not just 1 for the house, it's 1 for the apartment. Is that right?
No, I don't, the way I'm looking at it, it's 1 per structure, 1 per lot.
I
Right.
think the Board of Health and the Board
Is
of
that
Appeals
correct?
are going to have to sort this out.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
that's more my question, is
Yeah.
the way I read it written here, it says 1 per lot, if it's 10,000 feet or less, total.
Well, the good news is it's not ours to decide.
It's not our job, but this information is pertinent to
Yes, absolutely.
This bylaw, which is passed. It's gone to the Attorney General, and so we're waiting to hear whether it will be approved or not. Thank
The
you.
map is pertinent.
All
The
right.
map is pertinent.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, the Bourne Pond Bridge Replacement and Inlet Widening had a hearing at the Conservation Commission, which some members attended, and perhaps you want to tell us how that went, aside from the fact that it started at 11:30.
Well, not quite.
It went almost till then. Yeah, I thought I should have brought lunch, or I mean dinner with me. Yeah, as I mentioned in one note to Virginia, I can't call it a postmortem because obviously the project's alive. I was surprised the number of constituencies that have their fingers in this pie and have a particular point of view and a stake in the argument. But I thought it went really well, and I think all of the points that were raised are addressable. There weren't any roadblocks thrown up. There was a considerable amount of time spent on the dredging thing, and if I remember John Ramsey's point, is the flow is such through the design thing that there'll be minimal sedimentation. And the flip side of that is, if I understand correctly, they don't want boats going in there anyway. One reason they're keeping the bridge low. So I don't know what a controlling depth could be. If it was 2 feet deep, you'd be fine, I think. But again, I don't know. I'm not a physical oceanographer, so I can't tell you what's going to happen in that inlet.
The study looked at the rates of flow through the inlet at various widths, and obviously, rule of thumb, wider equals slower, and set the width so that it would be self-scouring.
Right, that's what John's
Okay,
point.
it's already self-scouring and then some. And
Right.
it's possible to make it somewhat wider and still have it self-scouring, and that's why the width is 90 feet
Because by widening it, you increase the tidal prism inside the pond,
also.
so you have more flow out
Yep.
on the outgoing tide. So
That's right.
there's some, I don't know the numbers, but there's some balance point that you can set,
Right.
given our tide range out there
Yeah.
and widening it.
And the other concern about the dredging, I won't call it a concern, the other point made by the commissioners was that there needs to be a plan for dredging when it's needed. And I've had a conversation with the harbor master under whom the dredging budget occurs. And he's geared up for this, and the budget actually is being increased for a number of reasons, starting in this fall town meeting. So I think that we have good pieces of information to bring back to the Conservation Commission. They continued the hearing until June 7th so that we could provide water quality monitoring information, dredging information. They wanted to know about the erosion, what the DPW was going to do with the erosion. If you've been down to Minonk Beach recently, there's an old Coast Guard station structure that's been exposed and a portion of the old road. Also, and so we need to report back to them on that. And then there were some dune planting issues as well. But I agree, it basically went well, it was wide-ranging, and I didn't hear anything requested that we couldn't respond to.
Any other comments or questions about that project?
Any questions from the audience,
That's
residents?
great, we have two Bourne Pond people here.
You're so far ahead of what I thought you were. I think it's wonderful. You have done a terrific job. I don't know how deep the muck is. When I was there, you never wanted to fall in. You just find the bottom. And then I worry a little bit about the new sandbars to some people and the beaches from development that's right there. They were.
Priscilla, could you use a microphone? I think there's a whole nationwide TV audience would like to hear from you.
Okay. Priscilla Moore, can you hear me?
Yes?
Very good.
I have such old memories of Bourne's Pond, and the memory starts with being able to see the bottom at all times until probably 1960 in that area. So I do know that Moonpenny owners were worried that they would be the covered with sand. In other words, a beach right out front forever and ever. And it is more sand than it used to be, but so is the change in the incoming water, too. That's so different from when I was in that area. So what you've done sounds like you've done a fine job. I don't know anything negative to say to you, but I do look forward to finding the bridge and saying I would love to see us have more money and a way of taking care of that beach and that whole sand shore from, believe it or not, Falmouth Heights right down to Washburn Island and that area, because somehow or other this erosion does not take place at the heights. Mike Kenny told me there was a reason for this and how it was designed, and you don't have the gouging out. But as soon as you reach Great Pond, from there east, you're having houses that are with rock fronts. And then you get to Green Pond, and more of those continue. The beach in front of Davisville, they used to play softball out there. It was, when you're growing up, you expected to be able to put your feet down. It was shallow. So this is the past talking to you. What the present is, is there a way of fronting our area of Minonk Beach so that we regain the beach and not having to provide a new beach every year? Starting in January, they start piling up sand, and every year it's a different kind of sand. I wouldn't mind some of it coming from Black Beach, but it's not that kind of sand. But that's where we are, is watching this and seeing how this will go and clear down to where, as you say, you enter into the Walk-Hoyt system of rivers and inlets. But I think you're doing a nice job, wonderful job. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very
Who
much.
doesn't want to dive into this? I don't know. Thank you very much. Now, if I don't break this.
Well, thank you for your service to this town. You've been watching out for Bourne's Pond and Davisville for more years than I'm going to mention, but it's been terrific, and we appreciate it. Okay, next item on the agenda is a grant application for a PRB demonstration project. PRB, for the TV audience, is a permeably reactive barrier, and Sia has been working on that.
Yeah, you start.
About a month ago, the PRB working group met with Jim Bagley, and we were discussing potential funding opportunities and looked at some preliminary costs for a PRB. As background, the Environmental Protection Agency has funded some studies. The Water Protection Collaborative funded some studies, and we have good information about 2 locations in town, Shorewood, which is a town-owned parcel, and Sailfish, which is a road in the Fisherman's Cove neighborhood. And as the working group continued to look at those 2 sites, the Shorewood parcel, the town-owned parcel, seems to have risen to the surface as an excellent site for a PRB. Fundamentally, because the flux is good there from now 3 rounds of water quality data that show a higher concentration, 8 to 10 milligrams per liter, at depths of, I want to say, 20 to 30 feet. So there's a stratigraphic layer where the concentration of nitrogen is high, and that makes it reasonable to think about siting a PRB. So to make a long story short, the committee thought looking for funding opportunities and thinking that the EPA may come up with a funding opportunity made some sense. That triggered some thought. As you know, one of the tasks of your technical consultant is to comb the universe for grant opportunities. And the 319 grant, which is a DEP grant, recently came out, and we went and looked at whether this project would fit into the priorities and the funding and the financial constraints of that grant. And it seemed like a pretty good fit. And it seemed like the timing was pretty good because we have this information from Shorewood about the actual nitrogen flux from the groundwater. So the committee talked about it, and Virginia and I talked about it, and we looked carefully at the grant to see if it would make sense, and have come up with the one-page project description that we sent around and a preliminary budget that I think Virginia is going to present and talk about, or unless you would like me to.
We just need the preliminary numbers.
So the preliminary numbers for a PRB project that is the 200 feet long, that would remove 250 kilograms per year, is approximately $370,000. And there is a match requirement of 40%, and I want to say that's in the $140 something thousand. One of the findings that we just confirmed this week is that the time of your technical consultant can be used as part of that match. So that means planning, project management, permitting, any kind of work that I was to do can be counted as part of the match. There's also Water Quality Management Committee time. The time we spend doing anything in the working group doing anything can also be counted as in-kind match. And the DPW itself, as they do installations of GIS locating and mapping or anything that they do, can also be counted. And as part of the budget, one of the items, as we all know from looking at these reports, the monitoring is a big chunk of what it takes to do these projects. And so that, to make this match number from a combination of all those sources, there would be about a $52,000 to $53,000 budget item for monitoring that could come from Article 17. And when we looked at Article 17, there's still $60,000 in the original apportioning of Article 17 for different demonstrations. There's still $60,000 unspent in that PRB sort of concept, how much we want to spend, that would be available. So the question is this a project that the committee would like to try to write a grant for? And you can report on the working group and their...
Right. The working group this morning went through the details and the draft budget and looked at the in-kind, whether we could get to this 40% number that's required of the in-kind. And we also looked at the costs that the consultant that we have already under contract had recommended and made some modifications to it. We're in something of a time crunch, so we haven't totally worked everything through, but because of the grant application process, it needs a recommendation from this committee. It then has to go to the Finance Committee and the Selectmen, and if we waited until our next meeting, which is on the 18th, we wouldn't be able to fit the deadlines because this is due June 2nd or June 5th. So we've brought it to the committee. We clearly have a description of what we want to do, and we're still working a little bit on the budget numbers, but in general, we know that the large chunk of the cost is the actual material that gets injected and the injection process itself, and that's going to come out to $370,000. So we're asking for consideration of the committee to move it forward to the Selectmen and the Finance Committee.
Comments, questions?
Discussions.
Ron?
I just have someone else can, I just have a few slides. to
Oh, yes.
give some idea. But someone else has a comment.
I mean, it looks like something ought to be done right away. Whatever pushing it takes to get it done by June 2nd, I think, should probably be done. On the face of it, the only thing I would do is that opening sentence, I would say to install and monitor. I I mean, because that's a key part.
Yes, this is a 2.5-year project.
And I think you want to be right up front with that.
Yes,
It's going to have a tail on it.
that's right.
And it's going to be,
That's a very good point.
so I would just say install and monitor.
Okay. Yeah, we say later on it's 2.5 years, but that's in the last paragraph.
And the
And it-
writing of the grant hasn't started yet. This was more,
Sure, oh
Try to
yeah.
get it
I know, I
done.
just, right up front though, it just makes
I'm
it
on it.
clear there's a long-term
good
commitment.
idea. Yep.
And just, this is more technical for SIA, but where you're talking about the elevations here, this is relation to grade, right? You're saying here -10 to -20
Mean sea
feet.
level.
That's
Mean sea
below.
level.
Mean
Wait a
sea
minute.
level,
To sea level or to grade?
Sea level,
sea level.
Okay, so,
So we should say MSL.
MSL.
yeah, so that's why I just, I wasn't clear on that. But then you're gonna be, pardon me, you're gonna be 40 feet deep is? Yeah,
Yes.
okay, that's what,
That's normal.
yeah, okay, I just wanna run my
thank you.
visualization process of these things. Yep. Ron?
Oh, great, thanks. I sent something around, but it's been modified a little bit since, and I believe I got my pointer. Okay. Basically, I think it's great that we put this, that we push on this as quickly as possible. But I do have a couple of recommendations, and they are, in borrowing this from the Cape Cod Commission.
Yes, it looks very
Right
familiar.
off the press. So, that pointer is, there it goes, kind of, that's not big enough.
There it is.
Anyway, this is up here is where the PRB is.
Correct.
Being considered now, and you can sort of see the density of houses there. They're within the watershed on this side. But the thing is that the MSL here is 18 to 20 feet deep along the road here.
Yep.
Okay, so if we go down here, well, we've got really much more bang for the buck. It's about half the depth. And so this is the area here. Okay, so this is, I don't know, were you planning to put it along the road? Is that the idea?
No, actually, it has to run perpendicular to the groundwater flow.
Oh.
So it actually runs at a diagonal. And if you want to give me your.
I'll show you. I have the.
Yeah, there we go. See, you show the diagonal
Yeah.
that's at right angles. So you have to,
Pointer.
you have to be in concert with
So what we did when
groundwater.
we put all these monitoring wells in through here is we learned that the groundwater kind of does this. And so the PRB is perpendicular to the flow of
Right.
groundwater.
So it goes northeast,
Do you
Well,
see have
northwest,
that,
southeast.
I mean, I think
Not-
Matt will agree with
Diagram of
this, the flow is
contour
usually going to be
lines.
perpendicular to the
You know, the one you were
surface
showing.
topography, right, in an open aquifer. Yeah,
In
generally
general,
speaking.
find that with
Yeah.
all these
Sure,
monitoring wells.
right.
So that's kind of nice.
So just when you're first looking at it, that's the assumption I make.
The
Yeah.
one you were showing, the three
Okay,
different
but in this area,
contours.
I mean, we're not quite that
That's
deep,
essentially what
but
it's not.
this is
Goes
a
over.
wooded
That it is, but I have to wait for him
There
to
it
finish.
is.
You just put in simple wells, but you gotta get the gear in there. It's just one option to look at there. And I don't know, there's not much development north of this, so I'm not sure how much is coming in there. But one of the big issues with this peninsula, as we go down, okay, this is Great Pond on the left. So Great Pond will always be on the left in the subsequent slides. But now we look at this, and now we're talking about lots of stuff. I mean, it goes all the way up. This is sort of coming down a ways, a little bit south into the estuary. As you go south, the depth of soil along the edge here gets lower and lower. In other words, this is like 6 to 8 feet in this area. And there's a road right here. So it's possible to consider something here. And then if you go down to the next segment, this is basically just going down there. It's the same kind of situation with high density and therefore probably lots of nitrogen coming in from this general area across that road into going westward into the estuary. And then similarly, further south, it gets shallower still, 6 to 8 feet, but in terms of the depth is less to the mean sea level. So it's a, but when you get down in here, now we're getting into the water, basically the water, the groundwater flows into Vineyard Sound, so this area is not so predominant. But this area up above in the Great Harbors development is incredibly densely developed, and therefore it's just something I think we should consider looking at cost and bang for the buck and a significant outcome. What I would suggest is that I don't have a microphone here. Okay. What I would suggest is that in the proposal, we identify this area as the project area that will be, and the specifics will be worked out. This is just a preliminary proposal, or is the final proposal going?
No, unfortunately, it's a final proposal, and you need
A map.
You need a
Right,
map.
okay.
But more than that, you need groundwater data to show that you have nitrogen present.
Right.
And they're not going to give you any more money than you ask for if you scope it out and you find out that doing it here is going to cost twice as
Well,
much.
there's a more significant.
Yes, this area actually has been studied. It was part of the Camp Dresser McKee Smith original study, and it has to do with the groundwater flow. So the little square that you have there, that's about all that's contributing to Great Pond.
Right, okay.
But when you go to Shorewood, you have a large area upstream which does not show on your slides. And so if you actually map, you've got a lot of regional groundwater flow coming in as well as the houses in the area. And that's what accounts for the higher nitrogen concentration. So that's a key finding. There's a second key finding. And that, let me finish. Second key finding is that the groundwater here moves fairly slowly. And so your flux is low. Whereas when you go up to the head of the estuary, the groundwater flow is much quicker. It's more than 2 feet per day, and the average is 1 foot per day. So again, you have better conditions. I agree with Ron that it's important for us to look at all of these areas, but in terms of this particular grant, we believe that we have the data to show that this is a good site. It's not to say it's not the only site, but that in terms of shooting for some money, we would want to use the Shorewood parcel.
And bang for the buck, too. It's almost certainly a much greater bang for the buck in terms of nitrogen removal.
And you have the numbers?
Yeah.
What are they?
They're in the Acapesket studies, Ron. That's exactly where these come from.
Right, well, what
where
are they,
we
though?
did.
I'd just like to know the
250
curiosity.
Yeah,
kilograms of
kilograms.
nitrogen per year.
250 kilograms.
250 kilograms for nitrogen because the groundwater flow is 3 times as fast. As you may recall from the Acapesket study, the groundwater moved really slowly. I want to say it took 7 days to move a foot, and I'd have to verify that. I don't have it off the top of my head. But because of the head at the top of the estuary, it's less than a foot, and the groundwater mapping that USGS has done confirms the speed at which the groundwater is moving. And then we found much higher concentrations in that particular in the wells at Shorewood than we found lower down on the peninsula. So that's why the subcommittee has really narrowed down from those Acapesket studies to looking at the Shorewood site. It's kind of remarkable. I mean, it's not intuitive necessarily that some place that looks like it doesn't have the close density around it, but part of it is also the groundwater divide at the peninsulas, that half of it's going into the other watershed. So you're not, and as Ron accurately shows, that you're only getting half of the development going into that area. So when CDM looked at it, they found that you needed a 500-foot PRB
to get those few streets. And they hadn't done the groundwater evaluations that we have now from the Acapesca study. And I think it's really that study, that Acapesca study, where we actually drilled wells, that showed us the slowness of the groundwater because of the mounding.
Yeah, again, general rule of thumb, you look at the relief with an open system, which is what the whole Cape is, the greater the relief, the water is
Moves
following
faster.
that. So call it a steeper pitch, I guess you would call it. So there's going to be more flux through a square foot or square meter or whatever subsurface sample you have there. And so you've got higher speed and you've got a higher concentration.
So what's the difference between these two? This has like 450 kilograms of nitrogen coming out of this group of houses per year. So what do your numbers show that would be a significant
I don't
difference?
know the numbers. Maybe
But-
Somebody should know the numbers.
The issue
on
is
this.
what's the groundwater
It's in the-
concentration.
It's not what comes out of the houses, it's what's in the groundwater.
Right, it's whatever it is that's coming through, what are the how does it compare number-wise, outside of theory? If
Well-
you've got the numbers, then we have the numbers, which is
We
great.
have the
We have-
Acapesca study.
Yeah, and what are the numbers? What is the
It was
difference between?
2 milligrams per liter versus 10 milligrams per liter in the groundwater.
In this area?
This area is two.
The actual test wells were a little farther north, that they weren't specifically in Great Harbors in what you.
They were a little farther north.
But they
Right.
were not far away.
Right. And I will look up the exact number, but it was substantially lower groundwater concentration.
Right, it just depends. I mean, if it's in this area, I don't recall where they did it, but
Well,
do you remember about, I mean, this, 'cause
yes.
there is this area here that is.
Lower Acapesca.
Right, if you just come,
Down-
it's where your light, see where there's a little creek right there? Okay.
Right there.
That's about
That's
where it
where they
was.
did it, okay.
Which is
that's not so
similar
different
density
here.
and,
It's a little about medium density, well, in a way. I was just looking at it, and and with groundwater flow coming in, well, anyway, those numbers, the 10 to 20, that's from the USGS study?
It's USGS data plus EPA data,
Plus EPA data, okay.
yeah.
No, all I'm saying is that, it just seems like, from a depth perspective, a cost of installation perspective, and a density clearly. However, it's, I don't know if we've got the numbers on the nitrogen load. That's good. It's just I hadn't seen that in the proposal, why it was selected of the different sites outside of knowing about that specific site, but not the many options.
Right.
So anyway.
Ron raises a couple of points that I hope the working group might be able to follow up on regarding cost, which is $370,000. How much of that is actually the cost of the PRB itself, and how much of it is everything else?
That's a good question. Okay.
By monitoring, we know to an extent.
about 50-something thousand for monitoring,
Okay.
about 6% of the total cost for engineering, but most of it is actually the wells and the fluid, the
And the
EVO.
material.
So it's like,
About $300,000 of it.
okay, so 300 is actually the physical structure that you're putting in the ground?
Yep.
For this 200-foot?
Wells and the cost of the oil, the
Okay.
emulsified
300,
vegetable oil.
okay.
The emulsified vegetable oil alone is, that's substantial.
Okay.
But Steve and I are going to do better than that.
All right.
But, yeah, and that oil, does it have to go to the surface, or is it?
It's within a 10-foot, is it 10 or 20 foot?
I think that
range?
we estimated a
A
20-foot.
20-foot.
No, it doesn't go from the surface. It's very targeted to the area where the concentration was higher. So we're not using material that we don't need to be using. So we're saving, it's some crazy price per gallon, so we're using as appropriate amount of gallons.
Eric?
Steve?
I agree with Sia. It's counterintuitive, and I had the same first reaction to it, but what convinced me is the fact that the proposed location intercepts the groundwater coming from so many more properties. They may be further apart, but there are just so many more of them that go through the same cross-sectional area, that there's a greater nitrogen flux.
Okay, well, There's, let's see if this thing is still up here. I don't think there are that many houses. How many houses are up above there? I mean,
We
The
are,
the
whole
old map.
northern,
Yes.
if you look at,
I know, I'm looking for it, I can't find it. Yeah, all right.
the upper watershed is like 4,000 kilograms. I mean, it's a pretty
That's
big
a
amount of
pretty good-
kilograms.
okay.
The fact is, we just have the data. When we have the monitoring well data that says this is the concentration of nitrogen in the groundwater, and it's going into the head of Great Pond. I mean, I think that's the truth. I mean, we have, and if it were one set of data, but we have 3 different rounds that are showing pretty much the same thing, to my understanding.
Can I ask another money question? Your match is about 150,000. You're looking for 52,000 in cash. That means 100,000 is going to be not cash. Your time and our time is not going to add up to 100,000. Where's the 100,000 come from?
I don't have the spreadsheet, but, yes, I do. I have my computer.
Yes.
Let me look.
The other things, we're going to have to expand our technical consultant's contract, because if this goes through, because there's nothing in it about this work.
No, that's my magic sentence.
Which
Other
technical
duties as
consultant?
prescribed by the committee.
No, I don't think it's in there.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yes, it
Oh, it
is.
is, oh, good, okay.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, great, okay.
So when, with the in-kind match,
Yeah.
there are 2 companies that are A, drilling the wells, and 2, providing the carbon source. And they've done quite a bit of non-recurring engineering to characterize local conditions, because it's something that's important to them. So while we're paying cash through the grant for the materials and for the wells to be installed, we were thinking that they could provide in-kind support of time that they've taken to do design and planning, and that would count for about half of it, plus or minus.
Right.
But again, we put together the budget based on information that we got on Monday, and are still trying to work through these details, and if the committee votes to go forward, next week would be spent trying to specify. I call these planning numbers. We wanted to get it more refined to a level where we're comfortable. But the idea was in-kind comes from all project participants. I think that's a fair way of putting it.
Can we see the budget?
Once it's not quite so general,
But you expect us to vote on it without it knowing what we're voting on?
total amounts.
No, but from where, like if there's some mention in there about Article 17, and you mentioned that and different things.
So the 52,000,
Right, as you mentioned, comes from a category, but that category is kind of not really fixed. Those categories are flexible. We have the article stated a certain amount of money, of which there were some ideas. Some of the
right.
things we've dropped, actually.
Yep.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that money that's there for that is there for that. It could be there for something else.
Well, you're
It should be
absolutely
there
right.
for- absolutely.
And this committee voted a long time ago to no longer follow
Right.
that set of guidelines, because they're 7 years old.
Hmm.
If you wanted to follow those guidelines, there would be 60,000 left in that category, but we're not doing that.
Right.
So we've talked about, the financial aspect of it is 52,000 out of Article 17 for monitoring the program. There is, I think the last time we reviewed, Virginia, you did a pretty detailed review of Article 17.
It goes back to winter when we were doing,
Right.
we were looking at how much money has already been bonded, how much remains to be bonded of the total amount, which was 2.77 million, how much has actually been committed, contracted, and what is the balance that is, whether it's been borrowed already or not, what is the balance? That analysis hasn't changed, and that bottom line, and Ron with his wonderful filing system here is going to bring that document
No,
up.
I can bring it up, but.
So it's 344,000.
4,000, yeah,
Okay.
right.
Which needs to be expended by 2020, and that's not a hard, fast rule, but it's more or less a guideline from the town financial director. This was borrowed, this bonding started in 2011, and bond council doesn't like to see bonds go on forever. So between now and 2020, we have this $344,000 to use for various opportunities. This is a grant opportunity. And it would use a piece, like a sixth, of the remaining dollars if we got the grant. I think we should say that the approval process is due June 2nd. We don't hear until late fall whether DEP and ultimately EPA is also involved in this, approve. And this would be a 2018 project.
I'm just saying, 340,000 is great to have that available for sure. But we still have a huge task ahead of us by 2020, as you
Yes.
say. 2020, it's interesting, clear sight by then. So in that, if this is the fall, we could actually go to town meeting if there's some, and at that point, and ask for, if there's certified free cash, to cover this kind of thing, as we did for the aquaculture monitoring.
I'm not sure from a grant writing point of view whether, I mean,
No,
you may be right, but.
We have
I
to
don't know.
commit to the match.
Uh-huh.
We don't
Right.
have to commit to where
Where it comes from.
it
Oh, I
comes
see.
from.
Right.
Okay.
So it's possible
That's a
that
possibility.
So-
we could
Yeah.
put a couple things together.
If we
maybe.
get funded, we could do something different, but I think that's a pretty big if. This is a big grant for this particular opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to mention, it's $1.5 million is the total amount of money that's available
Right.
for all grants all across the state. So for them to give us
300.
$360,000.
Quarter of it.
We'd be very lucky. On the other hand, we're actually putting something in the ground. I looked at the grants that they've been giving out, and most of them are fluff. Lots of studies and analysis of this, that, and the other. But putting something in the ground is different.
And we have a plan. I mean, that's something that's we have groundwater information, we have a plan for a PRB, I mean, we have the engineering. So it's a shovel-ready opportunity, and as Matt pointed out, if we write this grant and it doesn't get funded, it is written up as a project that we can then submit to other opportunities, like if a SNEP grant came out, or if, the other big one is if EPA came out with a grant for PRBs. But the working group has looked through and sifted through locations in Falmouth and has really landed on this particular site for a bunch of good reasons. So this is a good site to have a PRB, and not the only site for a PRB, obviously. Hopefully, there'll be a few more, because that's why we're doing a demonstration, to prove out a technology that we want to use in other places.
So, go ahead, Steve.
Sure, go ahead.
The other way I was looking at it with the working group was, well, the 50,000 is 1/6 of the 300,000 that's left. It's within the original guesstimate at PRB. And all of that is to be spent in the next 3 years. I mean, all the 300,000, because of the bonding or whatever. And can we think of anything else that you'd say is a higher priority?
Yes.
And that I haven't heard from anybody.
The comprehensive wastewater management plan has to be completed by the end of 2019, with whatever sources of funding. We have some money for
We're getting off the
that.
track here. We're not here
Yeah.
to discuss other ideas.
Right,
We're here to discuss this idea. And if there's a motion to be put on the floor, could I have one?
So moved.
So the motion is to
Recommend to the selectmen.
to the selectmen that the town apply for this grant, and that we commit $52,000 of Article 17 money for the purpose.
Well, if the committee wants to be specific, I think we needed to be upfront that Article 17 money is one way to achieve this match. I mean, theoretically, you could do an article in fall town meeting. I think that this is a more certain way of doing it.
Well, is the motion then just to ask the selectmen to approve applying?
I like his motion.
Well, I didn't hear it from him.
Sorry.
Is that we take it from Article 17,
Okay.
and I guess the understanding is that if some magic fairy brings in it from somewhere else, obviously no one's going to object.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. Do we have that?
52,000?
Yes, that was the number we said.
Motion to recommend to Board of Selectmen to apply for this grant for a PRB and to use up to $52,000 from Article 17, 2011.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Yes.
Okay. A discussion?
I just, yeah, I think that this is a reasonable way to proceed, and if we do find, or if we do try to find another way to get the additional funding, I mean, the town seems to be in a position to support some other things through certified free cash. You know, like the skate park is $500,000, things like this. So that the town's, you know, thanks to the wizardry of financial management here, it's very impressive that there may be a possibility that we could explore that as well. But I'm not sure how to word it in that way that it would be so that town meeting doesn't, you know, if we do come to town meeting, that they say, well, use your other money then or something, but, you know, kind of thing is saying like, this is, you know, one option would be to consider that as a.
I
Yeah.
do have to say, having had a recent conversation with the financial officer, she really wants us to use Article 17 money. That was a general statement, and she's very protective of free cash. So
Okay.
my guess is that she would look with favor on this and not on asking for free cash.
Okay.
That's just my.
Well, free cash isn't part of this motion. So
Okay.
let's stick to the motion. Any other discussion of the motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Great. Okay, report of members and staff. What have we been doing lately that we should hear about?
We just heard about it.
That was it? All right then. Minutes of the prior meeting?
Well, I just said, just
Oh,
one thing, to say, as we follow on this discussion, at the last, at the fall town meeting, we put an article was put forward to support the shellfish aquaculture monitoring in Bourne's Pond, and the committee supported that at that time. And it was understood at that time that likely we might need to come back to town meeting if another grant opportunity doesn't arise between now and whatever. But we also are going to wait until we know something about how well things are going there
Results.
for this year, because it will take more than 1 year. So I just want to mention that as we're thinking about this, whether we use Article 17 or we go back to town meeting and ask for, but from what Virginia said, it seems like Article 17 is now looming larger.
We're not worried about funding something that we don't know we need to do yet, but presumably we'll know by when that we need a second year or don't need a second year? September, October?
Well, we would need, I think by August, we should know if they're, how they're doing, if they're living and thriving.
Right.
We may not know how big they are going to be, but we'll know that. Because if we put in an annual town meeting warrant article, I think it has to go in like early September,
I get it.
right?
The question is, when are we going to know whether a second year is needed or appropriate?
Right, we should know, I think by August.
Okay, good. Okay, minutes of the prior meeting, everybody got them sent around. Any additions or corrections?
Motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Okay, moved and
Second.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I actually have to abstain, I wasn't here.
Yeah, that's right.
Never mind. The schedule for May and June,
Oh,
we should take a look at.
no, just one thing I forgot about, is that it wasn't on the agenda this time, but we had a discussion about, was it Oyster Pond? What was the? No,
I can't remember what you're not remembering.
well, it should be in the minutes. There was something that was, yeah, I'm sorry.
If either one of you
I'm just
remembers, we'll
blanking.
take it up
I'll
later.
You can bring it up at the next meeting.
No, I can,
Just
well,
let us know.
Well, okay, the next meeting is the 18th of May.
Right.
Oh, no, okay, I know what it was. It was the watershed TMDL, it was a compliance thing with using IAs. We had gone to a certain point, we couldn't vote on it because Eric wasn't here.
Okay,
So that was,
The working group
yeah.
hasn't met because John wasn't here. And
Oh,
he'll be-
okay.
He'll be back the 10th,
Yes.
Something like that.
The
So
10th.
we're
Oh,
gonna wait
okay,
for
okay.
John.
We're
All right, I
talking
just-
about that watershed management
Right,
plan
we're
at
gonna-
the meeting on the 18th, because
Okay.
John will have been
John
back.
will have been back, so we'll bring
And
it
the
up
working
when-
group will be
when-
able to
yeah,
meet.
Okay, so there's that. So in June, there's 3 Thursdays. And I don't think we're going to want to meet all 3 of them.
Well, what are the first and third
Uh,
Thursdays?
The 1st, the 15th, and the 29th,
First and 15th.
and the 29th, so
Well,
The 1st and the 15th would make
first
sense,
2?
because the other's close to the 4th of July.
That's true.
Yes.
The boats will
And
be
the
on
1st is a
water.
good distance from the 18th.
Yes.
Okay,
but
okay.
no, I just was wondering, because if we're not going to have a meeting in early July, not that I'd like more meetings, but I'm just saying, if the 4th of July would eliminate the first meeting in July, then that's just something for us to think about, if we foresee anything, because the 4th of July is on a Tuesday,
Okay.
but, so it would be on the
Contact
6th,
Bridge in June, maybe.
Yeah, let's see how we're doing
on the 15th.
on the 15th. of June.
Okay, all right, great,
And
okay.
keep the option open.
Right, okay.
Okay. That works for everybody?
So first
Yep.
and third, good.
First,
So
third.
all 3 of those meetings are at 3:30.
Well, it's sailing time too, is that, it's still
Yeah.
a good time?
Not June
Later,
1st.
later.
Not a good time.
4:30?
Later?
No,
or-
earlier. We were
Earlier.
doing 9:30 or something.
Oh, okay. Aye.
What works for you? You have a job.
Yeah, so that's why I asked for 3:30.
3:30.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
I didn't miss adjournment, did I?
No. No.
No? So we were trying to figure out whether we should change the time of the meeting, but
For the 18th?
the working group
No.
over here.
In
For the
June.
summer, you mean?
Oh.
Yeah.
The summer.
Yeah, well, just because of the sailing season. There are sailors in the room.
Yeah?
But I'm not hearing any enthusiasm for it, so
No,
let's leave it
no,
alone.
let's leave it where it is for now.
Okay.
Question for Matt, just a thought. Early, does that help? Or do you prefer
Yeah, I
end of
mean,
the
we
day?
could do.
What about
meetings
evening?
First thing.
Is evening?
Problem.
okay?
is
Evening, we get the
the
board of appeals.
Summer
Room
is,
room is not available.
yeah.
Yeah, does early in the day do you better?
Yeah, it's the first thing or
Like
end of the day.
8:30 or something?
Yeah. If that works for
Morning's
others.
fine with me.
8:30 is good.
Yeah, there's no wind there.
There's no way in that. That's right.
Come to a meeting, there's plenty of wind.
Well, let's at least have the 18th and June 1st, and then we'll visit
Yeah, okay.
whether we change the 15th.
Okay, that's a good thought. So we'll stay with 3:30 on the 18th.
Okay.
We'll stay
Yes.
with 3:30 on the 1st, and then we'll see how the wind is blowing.
Yes, exactly. And whether everybody has his boat in the water.
Okay.
That's a very good point.
You could be
Motion to
talking a lot.
adjourn.
Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. Second, Helvig?
Second.
Seconded, all right.
Thanks for holding up your
discussion.
end, Ron.
All in favor, signify by saying
Aye.
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 Opposed? No. Wait, the ayes have it. Done.
All right.
Thank you.